Endre Adi, poet and revolutionary, 1877 to 1919. Source: Suomi-Unkari, Magazine of the Finland-Hungary Friendship Society, 1952, number 13. On November 22nd, the people of Hungary celebrate the 65th birthday of Endre Adi. It can be said that the poet lives continuously, as he predicted in one of his poems, in the hearts of the liberated, rejuvenating, and ever more youthful people of Hungary, and that his life work has become, quote, rooted with millions of roots, unquote, in the many millions of new readers among the people. Workers and peasants read Adi's works in the libraries of factories and villages, and his words come to life on the stages of culture houses, both in towns and in the countryside. The new generation of Hungarian writers and artists who are building socialism guards and further develops the legacy of Adi. The holding of the Adi celebration demonstrates that now the poet truly receives the appreciation of the whole people. In 1906, Endre Adi's poetic work, New Poems, was published. It signified a turning point in 20th century Hungarian literature. This work of poetry is a declaration of war by Hungary's new poetry against everything conservative and reactionary, everything in literature and politics that is in the way of the nation's progress. The poet, who at the time was 29 years old, was thrown in one instant in the center of the struggles raging all throughout the country. Conservative writers, petty critics, and journalists marched as a united front against him, and one of the most powerful politicians of Austria-Hungary, Prime Minister István Tisza, took up his pen and attacked him. When Adi's first work of poetry appeared, Hungary was part of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, a semi-colony. Externally, the Habsburg dynasty was restricting its sovereignty and freedom. Internally, the people were being strangled by the system of feudal land ownership, the power of the aristocracy and the church, all tied to the monarch. And the emerging Hungarian capitalism, which appeared at the turn of the century and was closely linked in its interests to the feudal oligarchy, oppressed the people ever more severely. Adi did not only clearly see how the Hungarian peasants lived without land, in almost medieval serfdom, and how hundreds of thousands of them were forced to leave the country, while at the same time the plight of the working class became more and more unbearable. He also saw that the city bourgeoisie could not develop under the reign of the big landowners, clergy, and money aristocracy. After gathering experiences in the countryside and Nagyvarad, and later in Paris, the young poet and journalist arrived in the capital of Hungary and there joined the bourgeois radical movements with all his heart and soul. He ended up in the center of literary political life. At the time, he evaluated the situation by saying that the greatest hindrance to Hungary's development was the feudal rule of the Habsburgs, which prevented a Western-style ruling bourgeoisie from emerging in Hungary. Paris had opened his eyes in many ways, and his whole activity aimed at maturing a bourgeois democratic revolution. But soon he was forced to admit, outraged, that the Hungarian bourgeoisie could not solve the issue with a democratic revolution. Adi was born in 1877 in Erdmincent, in the county of Szilágy in eastern Hungary, which was a typical area ruled by magnates and bishops. Already since childhood in his family of poor gentry, which upheld revolutionary traditions, he could feel the oppression, so to say, in his body. He saw the misery of the peasantry firsthand, and he also noticed that the revolutionary power of the people was, quote-unquote, charged for explosion. Thus the belief that the many millions of Hungarian peasants are a great reserve for the popular revolution became one of the main inspirations for Adi's creative work. György Dosa, the leader of the Hungarian peasant rebellion of 1514, who was executed by the ruling circles of Hungary, became a central figure and symbol of the peasantry in Adi's poetry. He called the Hungarian peasantry the nation of Dosa, and himself Dosa's grandson. However, Adi was factual enough to recognize that the peasantry could not carry out the revolution alone, and that the, quote, beautiful revolutionary power, unquote, of the peasantry must not, quote, lack leadership, unquote. Who then is the leader of the peasantry? The bourgeoisie is unable to lead even itself. Therefore, Adi's bourgeois democratic gaze is directed towards the working class, which 1 year prior to the World War was rising powerfully against the ruling system that was drifting towards war. Adi's first revolutionary poems were born in 1908, together with the collection On Elijah's Chariot, which also contains the poem cycle Song of the Street. They are followed by the work You Must Love Me and the collection The Whites of the Future. The voice of the rising working class echoes in the Song of the Street. The basis of Adi's worldview is love for the Hungarian people, his own nation, and a desperate fear that Hungarians will fall behind the development of Europe. That is why he lashed the backward, fallow Hungary, lack of culture, and attacked narrow and self-satisfied nationalism. Adi also turned to Petofi, the poet of Hungary's liberation war. He encouraged his contemporaries by referring to the example of the liberation struggle and his revolutionary predecessors. The policy of 1848 must be continued and developed, he proclaimed. He saw the clergy as a fortress of narrowness and conservatism. He borrowed the words of Voltaire and other leading freethinkers. He saw clearly the decay of the French bourgeoisie. He saw the same process taking place in the Hungarian bourgeoisie and felt deeply depressed as a bourgeois revolutionary democrat. This made him repeat often dark and bitter predictions and, in his way, experience the mental and psychological crisis of the whole period. Adi was a born poet, and he reacted to every societal, political, and historical event as a poet. His style, not only in its form but also in its poetic language and expression, was equally revolutionary and new as his message. His poems are built on a single image, a single idea, a single feeling, and the exceptionally temperamental lyricist fills them with an unforeseen power and striking force. He radically rejected the epic representational style, which was then prevailing in Hungarian poetry. His poems are so suggestive, so original, that it is enough to read just one line of his poems to be able to recognize him from among all the imitators and contemporaries who came under his influence, and to distinguish his voice from theirs. Despite all its tremendous power, his language is sensitive and flexible, and is able to delicately express even the smallest movements or shades of consciousness and thought. He created a new treasure trove of lyric language for Hungarian poetry, as well as a new treasury of concepts and entirely new leading motifs. Josef Revai, a brilliant Marxist analyst of Adi's poetry, has referred to the fact that symbolism and realism, which portrays the forces deep behind social processes, appear to be opposites only in extreme forms. In a decaying society, symbolist poets seek the underlying forces, and those who have not had a living connection to the masses, to the struggles of the people, have felt that in the blind, groping, and self-satisfied world of bourgeois Philistines, only the poets see and hear. Since his 29th year to the rest of his life, Adi fought tirelessly, regardless of illness, with an undying, even Old Testamental hatred against the system which was throwing Hungary into a catastrophic war. He was able to experience how history elevated him above his enemies. Near the end of the First World War, revolution broke out in Hungary. Being mortally sick, Adi allowed himself to be carried to a celebration organized on the occasion of the founding of the Republic, and was happy when alongside Petofi, workers also performed his revolutionary poems. He died on January 27, 1919. A huge funeral procession followed him from the hall of the Hungarian National Museum on his last travel. Workers formed the guard of honor around his coffin. The revolutionary people stated their goodbyes to the great poet of the revolution. The revolution of 1918 to 19, that Adi had passionately fought for and awaited, was again followed by darkness, counter-revolution, quote, power of the magnates, bishops, and bankers, unquote, which ended up in fascism. The counter-revolution, which ruled for a quarter of a century, did everything it could to make Adi's poetry harmless. A new kind of struggle was being waged against Adi in literature and politics. The ruling class, which had recognized Adi's influence on the Hungarian people, tried to make his poetry serve different aims. In 1945, at the time of liberation of the Hungarian people and a victorious revolutionary rise, as the Minister of Education, Josef Revai, could say on the anniversary of Adi's death, in the name of the Hungarian people, the new Hungarian literature and cultural revolution, quote, great historic changes have dismantled all foundations from those who have distorted, falsely explained, and wrongly claimed Adi as their own. It is no longer necessary to fight about Adi, because who else could he belong to than those who the whole country belongs to. The new master of the country, the working people of Hungary, takes Endre Adi into its ranks. If we want to know ourselves, we must also know him and love him. In educating our people, we cannot neglect Adi's poetry. Adi was anxious about the nation's future. History has vindicated Adi's struggle. History has not vindicated his anxieties. It signifies a triumph for the great deceased poet that we can say, his poetry has played its role in our people's victory.